Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 124. My name is Nbz, and I'm sitting here in my pajamas because
in your
that's
pajamas?
all I do. Yeah, that's all I do
It's
these
4
days, is
o'clock.
sit in my pajamas. Mate, it's a weekend. What else am I going to do but sit in my pajamas when I have no need to go?
Run 26 kilometers like I did this morning.
Oh my goodness, look at this show off. Look at him being like, oh, look at me, I run long distances. I'm so healthy and fit.
I got a Berlin Marathon coming up in September.
Oh god, look at this, such a try-hard. Look at this guy. Yeah, see, like most of the world, Bally, I am sitting in my pajamas on the weekend because it is the way to go, and it's the only way to live your life.
I mean, I'm pretending like I don't do that. I do that all the time as
I
well.
know,
So,
yeah, literally all the time.
Yeah.
So, there we go. That's our individual situations.
I feel like
one of us.
A podcaster should never reveal what they record their podcast in, so that everyone can just imagine what we're wearing rather than...
Everyone just can imagine us nude sitting on like benches outside in the garden.
It would make zero difference, wouldn't it? Isn't that the crazy thing
Yeah.
about podcasting?
It's amazing.
It might even make me feel a bit more confident. I don't know.
Could do, yeah. I guess that's one of those things. When there's no camera trained on you, there's definitely less pressure. You can be scratching your balls and no one knows about it. It's just like, whatever, man. It's a podcast.
Whatever.
No one's going to hear that. Anyway, enough about what we are wearing, what we're doing. We're here to do one thing and one thing only, and that is, of course, to talk about video games, Nintendo, and all that fun stuff. And we're here today to do it. How are you doing today, Bally? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm very tired from my run.
Yes.
So we talk about what's coming up then.
Yeah, we shall.
Right. So first segment, we're going to talk about what we have been playing. Second segment, it's been a bit of an IGN debacle with this whole Filip Miucin issue, and it kind of happened, I guess, straight after our last episode. So we're finally 2 weeks later going to weigh in.
Welcome to the hottest takes on the internet,
hottest takes.
TNL podcast. That's us.
So yeah, we're a bit late to the party, but I think it was worth covering. And then for our third segment, we're going to also talk about the Smash Ultimate Direct. So yeah, we're also a little bit slow on that one, but yeah, we just wanted to check back in with the two big issues and give you our hot takes.
Absolutely. So yeah, a lot of things to talk about, a lot of things to discuss, but we're going to start, as per the usual, with video games. And guess what? The Octopath journey has finally come to an end for both of us, in slightly different ways. But Bally, you spent 70 hours with Octopath Traveller, and you're pretty much considered done with it at this point.
Yeah, so my thoughts on Octopath Traveller. 8 people gather in a tavern, swapping stories and preparing for adventure. It's not clear why they're travelling together. There's a pious cleric and a murderous dancer in this odd crew, but they've united nonetheless. As they wander across the world, each of these people gets their turn to take the reins. In one city, the hunter will continue her desperate quest to save her master. In another, the merchant will hustle her wares. Urgency...
This is a good joke, but
What?
like...
What?
Oh, see, that's an opinion that someone else has had, Bally. You see, you have to put your own opinions on this show. That's how that works.
What are you talking about?
Are you telling me that that's your opinion, the one that you made up yourself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay, all right, continue.
I take full responsibility for what I've done. Anyway, yeah, this was a very bad joke, to be honest. And the review that I'm reading from is actually Jason Schreier, who we're going to obviously talk about later in this whole debacle. But yeah, I just thought I'd give my own views on Octopath Traveller.
Yeah, good. That's very good. That's exactly what we want on this show, is like the unbiased opinion of your personal thoughts.
Yeah, those were absolutely all my thoughts. But I jest. Anyway, yes, I beat all Chapter 4s. I really enjoyed this game all the way through, basically. There were definitely some grindy points, but I definitely think the highs outweighed the lows considerably for me. I really enjoyed some of the stories more than others. I think Alphen's was maybe my favourite all the way through, and he finishes with a really strong Chapter 4. I think Ophelia, Ulbrich, Cyrus all had fairly strong Chapter 4s. And I think that as you go through the game, the lower levels are far easier to be carried by the high level characters, I found, sort of when you got to some of the later game bosses. I think that it's really unfortunate that a lot of the post game stuff that I'm sure many people listening know about, so I'm not going to spoil anything about the post game. I'm just going to talk about post-game more generally, but I think it's a real shame that it demands such crazy high levels in order to do it. So the recommended level for all the post-game stuff is around 75. So when I beat the game, I watched all of this post-game, like, shall I say what's there, or shall I still be very vague, Nbz? Shall we?
I mean, I don't know. Whatever you think.
Okay, minor spoilers for, like, if you don't know how JRPGs end generally. So there's...
Oh, you mean fighting a god?
Right, I watched it all online. There's like a boss rush and then a final boss. After each boss in the boss rush, there's a really awesome sort of panel that has all this lore for each character, and the way that lore explains how that character's story links to the overall more grand plot, I think is a really awesome part of this game. So as much as it's a very fair criticism, I think, when people say that there's hardly any camaraderie between the group, and yes, there are those little mini cutscenes there where you press the plus button and they have a little bit of chat, and I do like those. I think they add a little bit, but
they're kind of like Fire Emblem support conversations,
very much so.
Or like the Xenoblade conversations, heart to hearts.
But if comparing it to something like, I don't know, Earthbound, Final Fantasy VI, or any JRPG that I've played, the camaraderie in those games and how they relate to the story is far, 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 far stronger than a game like Octopath. So that's a fair criticism. But I think an unfair criticism of Octopath is, all these stories, they don't link up in any way. They don't, like, honestly, and I wish that they would have made all this final end games, like post-game arguably stuff. I wish they'd made it end game, and by reducing the required level to fight that final big boss, I think it would have encouraged a lot more people to go on and do it, because I think that
and also just make it clear what you have to do, because no one even knew how to access it. Like, you have to do these random side quests, and like who knows how you even get there. It really is a true post game in that sense, because like the regular player is not going to find it, and regular credits roll after you just finish with your first character. So
it almost felt to me, having watched all that post-game stuff, like the game might have been slightly rushed in the end of production, and it might have originally been part of the game, but then they decide, actually, no, let's focus on the chapters, and the whole point is the 8 paths, and we'll focus on the 8 paths and not how they link. I don't know. That's debatable, but I think that personally, I would have liked it if that final lore stuff was brought into the main game, because I think some of the ways that the stories link, I think it's not an amazing story, but I think it's a really cool way that they all link together, and might have added more to the game for those traditional JRPG fans who like a big grand story that all links up, perhaps. Not that I'm one of those. I certainly enjoyed these 8 chapters in their 8 separate paths. I thought the stories generally were quite strong. So I loved it all the way through, pretty much. I might go back at some point and do a little bit of post-game stuff, but the idea that I'm eventually going to get to level 75 and take on that final boss, I think is it's not going to happen, I don't think, personally.
Yeah, definitely not going to happen for me, because I haven't even finished all of the stories.
How many more you got?
4. So I basically did it. So I did the 4 characters that were my highest level, the ones that I had like the strategy that I knew how to do and just executed on, which is just like, hey, buff Ulbrich, debuff the defense with Therion, use Primrose to buff Cyrus's elemental attacks, and then when they're broken, just use Cyrus and Ulbrich to just mash like 25 to 30k damage in a single turn, and that was basically what I did for the rest of the game. I think some of the boss battles later on do have a good level of challenge to them that is actually really fun to engage with the battle system, and you do have to balance quite a bit of stuff. As you were saying, one of the bosses uses silence, so you're having to use items to get rid of that, and some of them just change around what their weaknesses are constantly, so you're balancing what you're using, and it's trying to keep them in a state where they're broken, and also have your party set up for the moment of truth where you can actually deal big damage. I used a lot of the BP items where you could just instantly get like 4 BP on your characters, because if you come to a turn where someone's broken and you don't, like Ulbrich only has has 1 BP available, you're not going to be able to take full advantage, you know? So that's why I used those, and it made the boss battles a lot quicker, more efficient, just kind of got through them more easily by doing that, which is weird because, as we had talked about before, not really the sort of person who uses up items a lot, but they do give them to you on a frequent enough basis that I felt like, you know, I'm only saving them for boss fights anyway, and there are a limited number of those, so that's kind of how I was going with it. So yeah, I finished those 4 chapters, and they were Cyrus, Primrose, Olbrick, and Therion, and those are probably the 4 I was most interested in from a story perspective. Alphen's one I would like to see the end of, and maybe Tress's, but like, honestly, I don't think the writing is particularly great as it goes on through. I think we were fed a little bit of not a lie, but I think that the strength of Primrose's Chapter 1 is so good that it set me up to feel that the rest of the game would have as strong premises for all the stories, and they don't, and the characters don't really go that many interesting places. I think it leans into cliche quite a bit, and I think overall I'm just not invested in those other stories enough for me to even care finishing them. And to finish them, I'd have to grind those guys up in way more levels and get them sorted into my party and be able to do them. I just can't be bothered because there's nothing. I don't see real value. But you got to
definitely check out how they all link up. I think it's really.
I mean, I guess, but like, even you saying that is like, oh, you get this lore dump that says how it connects to the wider.
I don't like
wider
dumps,
story,
but,
like the wider story is like, okay, I guess there's some demon probably because Cyrus is looking for this book from the far reaches of hell, and then I don't know, there's another thing that links in with that, the gate, I think the gate of Dimmis or something like that, and I'm like, oh, clearly this is all going to link together because all these things are like hinting at certain things in the world, and you know, the sacred flames of Ophelia, it's all going to link together somehow. But to me, it's way too breadcrumby and not very substantive. Like there's nothing meaty around it to make it have an impact, so there's no reason for me to even care about that lore dump. And
the fact that the coolest part of the story is in a lore book before the final boss of a optional post game is not a good look for this game, even though I think it's cool that they link.
No. And also, given both of our perspectives on the way narratives are done in games, I think that, you know, something that you find really great is probably something I'm going to be like, fucking whatever, you know? Like, I think that's just how
that is
we are.
True with our experience, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad I finished it. It definitely did not hold up to what I expected from the game. I thought the game would be much better in terms of its narrative and doing that kind of stuff. But, you know, the battle system is really, really good, and I think it's one of the most enjoyable battle systems I've played in an RPG.
Yeah, it's my favourite JRPG battle system by quite some way, personally.
It's pretty close for me.
Yeah.
I would say Final Fantasy 13 is very much up there for me, and Xenoblade 2. Xenoblade 2 has a great battle system that I really loved. But
I really hope this team go on, and judging by how well it's sold, I think it's almost a dead cert that they're going to do something similar and have a round 2 where there are obviously flaws we've talked about. I think that they might go for something more traditional and go for the more linear grand story that a JRPG would go for, maybe take out some of the grinding, strengthen some of the story stuff, and I think you've got the makings of a really great modern classic. And I think that this, as much as I really loved it, I think that I don't want to call it a modern classic because I think you can do better. It's sort of thing.
By miles. There's so many things to improve on from it.
But I think this is still one of my favorite JRPGs. Absolutely, not that I've played a ton, but like I really did enjoy it.
I mean, yeah, like this is not even the best JRPG on Switch for me. Like Xenoblade 2 is way better than Octopath, in my opinion. For a lot of reasons,
different, but
they are totally different. But yeah, I would take Xenoblade 2 over Octopath any day. And yeah, I think it just didn't quite hit in the same way that I wanted it to, which is disappointing. But I did enjoy what I played of it, and glad that it came out. I'm glad it's been a success because honestly, all it does is show that traditional RPGs, Japanese RPGs, can thrive in this day and age and be a viable option.
Once you give them a great soundtrack, which I think is maybe the strongest part of this game, and combine that with what I think are really great visuals. I know that some people think that like elements are too dark here and there, and there's some lighting issues potentially. I think that the overall presentation with this game was just so perfect.
It's like a modern AAA take on a JRPG.
Oh, yeah. It's great, and I hope they go places.
Definitely.
I've also beaten another game that came out just a couple of weeks ago, and that is Overcooked 2. So obviously the sequel to a game that me and Caroline really enjoyed earlier this year, which came out on Switch last year. We picked up on a sale or something, I think, earlier this year. It's basically the same game with a little bit extra. So the new mechanics are the throwing mechanic. You can now throw raw food and chopped food, but you can't throw plates or finished dishes, essentially.
Okay. Right.
And there's also lots of new dishes you can make. A lot of Asian dishes like sushi and steamed things, which are an absolute nightmare to make.
Any dumplings going on?
Yeah,
there?
you've got like you can make like a meat dumpling. So you got to take meat, you beat the meat, fry the meat, then you take the meat, put it in I think you put the raw meat in the steamer with flour, and then it's a mixer with the meat and the flour, and then you take that and then you put it in the steamer, and then you get a plate and then you serve it. So it's an extra step, which is one of the tougher new dishes. And then obviously there's new kitchens as well. There's a lot more emphasis on the kitchens changing mid game, essentially, where, for example, this was shown at E3 this year, but there's a stage where you start in a hot air balloon, and then the hot air balloon crashes into a sushi restaurant, and then you have to start making sushi. So it sort of changes mid-game, which it's cool, it works, it's fun, it's everything you would expect Overcooked 2 to be. Perhaps there could have been a few more new mechanics, but I really don't know what these could have been.
So does it feel more like, I guess, an expansion or more DLC for the original game in that sense? Because they haven't really changed it that much. And honestly, I don't think they should change it, because the formula is proven and it's kind of that is the way that game should work.
One huge part that they've added to this game that I've not even mentioned, that I've not used at all because I've just been playing locally with Caroline, is the online. And that changes a lot potentially. I really like this game. It's obviously not as impactful as the first game. That was a hugely impactful game in terms of like a co-op game that me and Caroline have really enjoyed, and we really like this all the way through. I think my favorite thing about Overcooked aren't necessarily the really zany kitchens. It's the fairly basic kitchens that demand a very high point count, if that makes sense.
Oh wow, would never have expected that from Captain Vanilla himself.
No, as in like, I like Overcooked is all about the efficiency, and I feel you have much more freedom to be efficient in the stages that don't mess you around as much. So I prefer
because there's no like RNG of you sliding off things or falling down gaps or holes or stuff like that.
There's some really dodgy hitboxes at points in this game. It's basically a game all about hitboxes, where you're trying to just align your character's hitbox as efficiently as possible, pick something up. But I mean, the idea where you can stand behind the counter, so you see a frying pan over there and you can just chuck your raw meat straight into it from like a few meters away is very satisfying.
That's pretty cool. It's like being a ninja in the kitchen.
And I think that could really, not that I've really delved into speedruns of this game or any Overcooked game, but that could be a real avenue where duos kind of, or any combination, start really chucking their food as efficiently as possible, because it saves a lot of walking. And there were lots of levels where I'd be on like some floating island that kept drifting past Caroline, and the most rather than pick up my thing and walk to her island and put it down, it was just way more efficient just pick it up and chuck it onto the floor like of her island. So it was fun, and like it's zany, and it's I've not played a ton of games that have come out this year. I think I'm on like 5 that have come out this year, but it's a great game that's come out this year, and I would highly recommend it if you've not played the first one. Maybe start with the first one if you've not tried any of them. I don't think
that's what I was going to say. Is it a step up in terms of difficulty? Because I've heard that from a few people. I think Greg Miller in particular was talking about how it feels like kind of if you've beaten the first game, you should pick up from where that left off.
I think they spend a lot more time on tougher dishes that are then cooked in tougher kitchens for most of the game.
So does that mean like dishes that take longer to do and put together? Yeah,
so stuff like sushi. Sushi, you have to cook the rice, chop the fish, and put it in the nori, basically put it all together. Like that 3 ingredients is tricky, but then that goes up to 4 and 5 ingredients, where you have like a pizza that's got pepperoni and like,
different toppings on top of it as well.
So... And then there are levels that mix burgers and pizzas, and then so they really ramp up slightly quicker, I'd argue, in this game. Some of the stars, so I should show off and say we got 3 stars in every level because that's how we enjoyed playing this game.
You know, yeah.
And we made sure we had 3 stars before moving on to the next level, which was...
Did that maybe impact your enjoyment of it in any way? Because for me, as someone who did that with games like Super Mario 3D World, I loathed a lot of that game after I did that, because there were levels where getting the green star was a frustrating nightmare that I wanted to escape from, and yet I put this barrier on myself to be like, no, you're not moving on until you get these 3 stars, and you better like it, son.
No, we really enjoyed it because, not to blow our own trumpet, but we are actually quite good at it, and our skill level combined with how many points they required for the 3 stars was never... We'd never had to replay a level more than like 3-4 times max, and that only happened.
As someone who has played with both of you, I can say that yes, it is quite intimidating to play with both of you because you know what the fuck you're doing, and I'm just running around like a headless chicken, being like, "Oh dear God, what am I doing? I'm sorry, I'm awful, I'm bad."
So yeah, I think the point thresholds are fairly generous for our skill level, so that worked fine. So it wasn't an issue.
Okay,
I really did enjoy it, and the final boss, similar to the first game, it's like a 15-minute marathon that goes through all the food in the entire game, basically. It wasn't. I think we did it like first time actually, and yeah, it's not as hard as the first game. So there are elements that are harder, but there are plenty of other elements like the thresholds on stars that I think are lower for this game, perhaps.
What do you think they'd need to do for a third game in this series? Do you think it's okay to just make kind of minor improvements and upgrades as they go along, or do you think there is something they could do to make it stand out and be a bit different?
I really can't think of anything, and yes, they can add more dishes and add more stages. That's fine, and there's definitely a market for that. I don't know if I would be dying to go day one on an Overcooked 3 if it came out tomorrow. I think Caroline might actually, so maybe I'd end up playing it anyway.
You'd be dragged into it.
Sure, but yeah, I think they would be scared beyond stuff like the throwing. If they keep going down that route, I think they might be scared to shake up the original formula too much. I don't know. If this was all the Overcooked that was ever going to come out for the future, I'd personally be happy with that. I've had my fill. I think as a co-op mechanic, it's an incredibly strong one. I just don't think that you can't keep reinventing the wheel necessarily in a game like this, and part of me doesn't want them to try. Like, I think that
it'd be cool to see Ghost Town games do something new, and different.
Yeah, maybe move away from co-op, do something else. I don't know, but I think
have a single player thing.
Yeah, the local co-op scene is definitely one of the kings of that scene. So yeah, I really liked it, and maybe Overcooked 3 is a bad idea, but I'm happy to be proven wrong.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Nbz.
Yeah. So I finished up Megaman 4, which I had been playing on the Megaman Legacy Collection. It's definitely not as memorable in a lot of ways as the other Megaman games. I think it's not held as in high regard, maybe because of that fact. A lot of the stages don't feel as maybe tightly designed as some of the previous stuff in the last few games. And I also think the weapons and the way they work are a little bit weirder and not as fun to use. Some of them are just they feel like variations on a regular gun. Like, so one of them is the dust, I don't know what it's called, I guess the dust gun, dust buster. It's from Dustman, and it shoots out, and then after it hits the enemy, it does like 4 diagonal kind of bullets off in a different direction. One of them is the Pharaoh shot, where you basically charge it up into this big like glowing globule, and then you can throw it, kind of like the regular charge beam that you get playing the game anyway. And then like other ones, one is like a dive bomb guy who it's like an auto-targeting missile. Overall, it just didn't feel like the weapons and the situations you're using them in were as interesting this time. I think by the time you get to Mega Man 4, you're like starting to run out of ideas, I guess, in terms of what you can do. But hell, there are way more games that came after this, so clearly it's going to go in some different places. But yeah, I think I prefer this in terms of structure to 3, because what 3 did was it made you fight all the Robot Masters, then you had to fight through 4 extra stages that were way tougher and had like 2 bosses in them each, because the 2 bosses were basically clones of the bosses from Mega Man 2. Then you had to fight through Wily's castle, which was like another extra step. Whereas this game is like, okay, there's this other villain whose name I can't remember, and there's like the amount of story in this game is so minimal, it's ridiculous. But like, there's maybe one cutscene where you defeat the final, who you think is the final boss, and it's like, no, actually, this scientist isn't the evil final boss. He was just being controlled by Dr. Wily. And after you get through his castle, you're like, oh, now I need to go through Dr. Wily's castle. So you go through Wily's castle, and those stages I think are probably better overall than some of the Mega Man regular Robot Master stages. Yeah, I don't know. When you get to a point with Mega Man where it's like, yeah, it's kind of the same thing up to a point, and there's not a huge amount that sets it apart. I did like the charge beam, but I never got to use it in a way that probably felt that efficient or good, because I think one of the things with this Legacy Collection that makes me less familiar with the games I'm playing that I'd not played before is the fact that the rewind button is there, so I have less chance to kind of die and play through stages multiple times to really get to know them and to be familiar with them. So that might be one of those things that is just the factor of me trying to get through it and not wanting to, bang my head up against a wall. And that's fine and all. I still enjoyed it. I still think it's a fun Mega Man game, but I wouldn't say it's anything special.
How many have you done now, and how many have you got to play? And do you intend on finishing them all?
So I've played Mega Man 1 through 4 now.
Okay.
I played 3 on Wii U. So I basically, when I booted up this collection, I played through 1, and then I played through 2, skipped over 3 because I didn't want to play it again.
What's
and
the
then
one on the Super Nintendo you played on the classic?
Mega Man X, that's the X
right.
series. And the X Legacy Collection just came out recently. So you got X Legacy Collection 1 and X Legacy Collection 2. You also have Mega Man Legacy Collection 1, which is the one that I'm playing right now, which has Mega Man 1 through 6. And then you have Mega Man Legacy Collection 2, which has Mega Man, I guess, 7 through 10. Which 7 and 8, I believe, are Super Nintendo games. 8 might be a PlayStation game. I don't know. I think they're both Super Nintendo games, and then 9 and 10 are, as I said before, they were released during kind of 2009, 2010 on WiiWare and Xbox 360 and stuff like that. And 9 and 10 are, classic Mega Man games in the style of 2, 3, and all the rest. But yeah, I'm going to play through 5 and 6 at some point. I think people say that 6 is actually quite good. 5 is one of those ones that I've not really heard anything about. I don't know much about. I do know that the Game Boy version of 5 is very highly regarded, but that's because it's not actually a port of real Mega Man 5. It's kind of its own game in its own right, whereas the other Game Boy ports of the Mega Man games were just, I guess, reimagining kind of reworked versions of those originals. So maybe I'll play the Game Boy version of Mega Man 5 at some point as well, because people seem to like that one. But yeah, I'll get through the rest of the series. I'll play them all. It'll be fun. There's something about Mega Man that is just very comforting and easy to play and pick up and enjoy. Music's always fantastic, always good to look at. I like Mega Man a lot. So, yeah, nothing too special about 4, but I've beaten it. It's done. And then finally, I this morning was like, I've got to play something new that I haven't talked about yet. So I booted up my Twitch launcher, which is, if you don't know about Twitch Prime and it giving you a bunch of free games, hey, if you have Amazon Prime, you should probably go ahead and take advantage of that, because Twitch have been giving away so many free games. It's kind of ridiculous. I think during the month when Prime Day was happening, they gave away like 30 games or something obscene. So I have things like Battle Chef Brigade on there. I have Banner Saga 1 and 2. All these games that I just haven't played and intend to play, and I just got them dumped on me. Kentucky Route Zero, which I think the final act of that has still to be released, and I'm waiting until that happens, and I'll play through all of that too. So there's loads of things that I've been playing, or want to play from Twitch Prime. And Superhot was one of those games that I remember people talking about and really loving when it came out back in 2016. And I always thought it was cool, because the idea behind Superhot is that it's a first-person shooter, but when you move, time moves. So enemies and things will be moving in slow motion. So if you're just standing still, it's very, very slow, but still things are still moving. And as soon as you start moving, things start moving in real time and faster. And so what you're doing is, it feels more like a puzzle game than necessarily a first-person shooter, because you're dumped into these scenarios where it's like, okay, there are maybe 7 enemies in this level. Weapons are set up in a particular place. You can do some really cool things where, so once you run out of bullets on a gun, you can just throw the gun at an enemy to stun them, and then in midair you can catch their own weapon and then use that to shoot them. You can just pick up random objects on the ground to throw at enemies to stun them. You can punch enemies in the face. You eventually get a samurai sword that feels fucking cool as shit, because you just like, there's one level where you're jumping from a high ceiling down to the floor, and you like drop on this guy and just like slice him from the back, and then you like throw the samurai sword at the other dude, catch his gun, turn around, shoot the other dude. So it makes you feel fucking awesome when you're playing through these levels, and it gets to that point where if you keep dying on one level, you'll eventually get really fast at it, and it almost is at the point where you're not really stopping to slow things down because you know where everyone is going to be, and so you're positioning yourself in the right position to be like, okay, I'm going to shoot him, grab his weapon, throw that one at the other guy, warp into this other guy, get the samurai sword, throw that one down while I catch this other thing, and like it becomes this chain reaction of different events.
Sounds like quite a physics engine.
Well, yeah, it kind of is, and it does some really cool stuff. The way the enemies break apart, they're all basically these faceless, like red, kind of polygonal models, and the style of it is very clean, like very white. Every area is just completely white and filled with nothing, and you have the contrast of the red enemies on that background, which is pretty striking, and so the way they crumple and fall and the way, you know, throw things at them is very cool, and it's also kind of wrapped in this layer that is similar to an old computer, like a DOS computer, where you have like a file directory and there's games inside it. There's like this weird mini game where you're like, it's using ASCII art, and you're this tree chopper, and you basically have to press left and right to cut down trees. So it's like got this, it's almost like you are playing on this game inside of another computer itself. And then it starts doing some really weird stuff, which I'm not going to spoil, but it's very, very cool. It breaks a lot of the fourth wall stuff going on, and I can't really describe it, but the game is more than just the core concept of slowing down time and kind of figuring out puzzles in a first-person shooter, and it's only 2 hours long, and it is one of my favorite experiences I've had this year so far. It's just, it does some wild, crazy stuff that is really enjoyable and surprising, and I think, you know, they should probably bring this to Switch because I think it'd be a good fit there. But just as a core mechanic and game, it's just so incredibly satisfying. You just feel amazing when you shoot these weapons off, and while you're I think the other part of it is dodging bullets as they come at you. So you like slightly move to the side and they're slowly coming towards you, like, oh, can I make it, and like that moment where it just passes through you and you retaliate by shooting the guy in the head. It's
Does the slow motion mechanic mean that your brain isn't having to think any faster? It doesn't feel like...
Yeah, I mean, you're thinking at the speed at which you are going, essentially. There are moments where things will speed up, because when you grab a weapon out of the air, like, it does a canned animation that is you grabbing the weapon, and so while that's happening, a set amount of time will elapse. So if you're grabbing a weapon out of the air and a bullet is coming towards you, it might not be a good idea to do that. It might be a better idea to wait until a bullet passes you, then grab the weapon, because by that point the bullet has gone and it's not going to hit you mid kind of catch, as it were. But yeah, it means that every time you're in the level, you are figuring out, like, what is the best approach to this level, and that's why I would say it's more of a puzzle game and less a first-person shooter, because while there is aiming, because it's slow motion, someone who's coming at you might just be, you know, standing still at some point in time, so it's not like you're aiming to try and hit them. There is a degree of leading enemies, so if they're running somewhere, you can shoot ahead of them to where they're going to be when it hits them, so that plays into it somewhat. But yeah, they have different varieties of guns. There's one gun that sprays multiple bullets that can be very useful. There is one that is a bit riskier to use, because when you press the fire button, it shoots like 3 bullets in a row, and because when you shoot a bullet, time is just regular, it can make it so that it keeps moving for a longer period of time than you maybe want it to. So it's kind of a risk-reward one where you can take down multiple enemies with it, but it also, you know, has a little bit of a kind of a nuance to it there. So overall, I loved it. I think, you know, the best moments are when you're when you finally figure out a sequence and you're like, oh man, I nailed that, and you watch back the because what happens at the end is like it will flash super hot on the screen like multiple times as it shows you a real-time replay of what you've just done.
Oh, cool.
So you see like it going fast, and you're like, oh, like I just grabbed that guy. There was this one sequence that was so funny, was I was coming out of this office and I shot this dude, threw the gun at him, grabbed his gun, threw the gun at the next guy, grabbed his gun, threw the gun at the next guy, grabbed his... Like, I'm shooting the guys, grabbing their gun, throwing it at them, and then grabbing the new one. It was like 5 dudes in a row, and it's just... When it played back afterwards, it looked amazing, and I was like, wow, I'm a badass. I'm like in the Matrix. I would say that's probably a good analogy to it, is like, you kind of feel like you're in the Matrix doing like these slow motion moves and dodging away from bullets and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think of other games that have tried stuff like that, but it doesn't sound like any
really
of them have done it.
It's such an innovative and unique idea, and I think the aesthetic is so well built for it. Just the idea of focusing on the level design as opposed to, you know, what everything looks like. The clean aesthetic makes it so you are very easily able to identify where enemies are, because that color, like that red, is so striking. And also like the way things break apart and split and get destroyed is very cool. It's great, and I just decided to play it on a whim this morning, and I was like, yeah, this is awesome. Just sat down, played the whole thing, 2 hours through. The other layer to it is, while you're in this kind of fake computer area, there's like a friend who you're talking to, and so they're chatting at you, and you type things back to them, but it's one of those things that no matter what you type, it types what the game is going to say. So the game has like a narrative to it, and it's the responses that you give are pre-written, but the way that you type them into the computer is you just tap on your keyboard and you're just like, you feel like you're in a movie, you know, like when people in movies just like mash on keyboards to do like coding and stuff. It feels like that. You're just like mashing on the keyboard, but like a perfectly worded sentence is coming out, and it's not what you're intending to write, but it's kind of gives you that feeling. And I think that's a very clever thing mechanically to put into the game. It's like making those chat sequences feel more interactive, as if you're actually like the hacker person doing it. But yeah, it's very cool. So I would highly recommend giving Superhot a check out. You know, not just me who says that.
Another game to add to the list of games that need to come to Switch.
Definitely, yeah. I think it would be really good on there. And then, like, after you beat the game, you unlock like an endless mode and stuff. And I think there's creation tools in there for people to make their own levels, which is definitely a thing you can do, because it kind of is custom built for that. It's like the way it works is like, have a set number of enemies, put these weapons in specific places, and have interactable objects that you can throw and stuff like that. And yeah, it's great. Play Superhot. It's amazing. Yeah. So there you go. That is video games we've been playing. Don't go anywhere, though, because we'll be back after this break to discuss the plagiarism story, IGN, and all that nonsense. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Alright folks, welcome back to the second part of the show. Usually we'd be doing some emails, but there have been 2 big news stories that we wanted to cover this week in some depth, so we decided to cut them out into 2 sections. So for the first segment here, we're going to be doing a bit of a chat about the IGN plagiarism story, and then we will talk more about Smash Brothers after that. So yeah, where do we start here? I mean, I guess the thing is known by most people. Filip Miucin, Nintendo's former IGN Nintendo editor, has now been fired from the company as a result of a review that went up on IGN for Dead Cells that came out recently on Switch that was found by a YouTuber called Boomstick Gaming to be plagiarized pretty much completely from his video. Since then, a lot more instances of plagiarism have been found. Almost everything he's ever done.
I mean, the community was challenged by Filip himself.
They were, and we're just in a state of affairs now where I mean, people are still finding stuff. He's kind of gone radio silent, and I feel like his career is pretty much over, and he will never work in video games again, unless he probably becomes some alt-right advocate, launches a Patreon, and gets all the Gamergaters to join his cause, which just happens all the time. So that could probably be a thing. But we'll see. So this story is one that is incredibly not only frustrating but just angering in a lot of ways. And so I remember when they first hired Filip at IGN, I actually made a post on, it might have been Gaff at the time before Gaff went up in flames, being like, IGN hired this guy, he's from YouTube, this seems weird, don't you think? And a lot of people in there were like, oh, okay, I've seen this guy's YouTube videos before, whatever. It's, it seems like IGN are going for that crowd, that particular YouTube crowd. And from the very beginning, I always had a bad feeling about it. I had this idea of, why would they go with this guy who's just made this YouTube channel, like launched at the start of 2017, got on the Switch hype train, clearly has a very strong editing background, like his videos were very slickly edited, although I now call that into question as to whether he actually did that or whether he farmed it out to someone else. But in terms of his opinions and his viewpoint on things, it was like I watched a couple of his videos before he had done anything on IGN just to get an idea, because I was a huge fan of Jose Otero and I was a huge fan of NVC at the time. And I was like, well, I don't know, this guy doesn't seem to really have much of a personality that is interesting. And then he, in his first appearance on NVC, his favorite video games he listed, I think, were Ocarina of Time and Mario 64. And I was like, okay, all right, well, nothing interesting about that at all. That seems very boilerplate. And then after that, I dropped off NVC as a result of him hosting, really, because it became a show that was incredibly boring, never went in much depth on anything, very surface level opinions and not too much, engaging talk about Nintendo overall. And then this happened. I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. Like, finally, it kind of makes sense, the reason to why he always had such kind of shallow opinions and ability to kind of articulate himself about Nintendo, or have the knowledge about Nintendo, because it seems like, I don't know if he ever had a passion for games at all. It's one of those weird things where every single thing that he's written seems to have some form of plagiarism in it. And I question,
has he ever had a strong opinion on any video game on the internet ever?
I don't know.
Like, I having a strong opinion and passion, I wouldn't say are exactly the same, but they often overlap if you're talking Venn diagrams. And I think that what makes a good host, like Jose Otero, he had lots of strong opinions on lots of Nintendo video games. He had some less unusual opinions, and that's fine. But the fact that he had strong opinions and shallow opinions on a range of things made for an exciting dynamic on that show, and that is something that Filip just sucked the life out of in many ways, massively due to his lack of what felt like passion.
Yeah, it was also knowledge, right, as well, because you expect someone who is the Nintendo editor for IGN, the biggest video game website on the planet, to be someone who can tell you the names of development studios and developers, and knows...
I know this has been banded around a lot, but I personally feel fairly strongly about it, and I know it was a complete dud of a system in terms of sales, but to have some knowledge about Nintendo, you kind of need to own at least a Wii U, and kind of have a knowledge of playing that and what games came out on it and whether they were good or not. Otherwise, how are you meant to justify opinions on Nintendo games when that, as badly as it sold, it was still a key point in Nintendo's life cycle of the last 6 years? Yeah,
I mean, that's one that I feel less kind of opinionated about, because granted, lots of Nintendo fans didn't buy a Wii U. For good reason, I think, in a lot of cases. Even yourself, you were like at least 6 to 8 months late on adopting
Absolutely,
Wii U.
but I hold the Nintendo editor of IGN perhaps to a higher standard.
Right, but he didn't know he was going to be Nintendo editor of IGN when
sure.
the Wii U came out, like that's not, I just don't find that as strong of an argument. Some people will, but it was just this lack of knowledge overall and general way he hosted the show. But I feel like we should probably get away from just bashing him as a person, because it should more be about like the larger conversation about plagiarism and what constitutes plagiarism, and just the absurd way in which it is very difficult to catch something like this in this day and age, right? Because this wasn't a review that was written down somewhere. It wasn't something he could have copied and pasted. This was lifted from a YouTube video, which I guess YouTube has like tools and stuff to search for music in their videos to copyright people and stuff, but you would have had to go through all the YouTube videos and listen to them all through to find out that this had been done. Right. And the only way that he was caught is the person who did the review happened to be an IGN fan and watched their video and realized the striking similarities and then made a video that exposed it to everyone else. Because otherwise he would have continued to work there for however long and continued to do this in a pathological way. Like literally everything that he wrote was plagiarized in some form, even going downright to his resume, which was found on a LinkedIn kind of like template profile, which is like, it's crazy.
Like this Dead Cells review, it was his first ever video review that he wrote the script for. I say wrote the script for, plagiarized the script for, and edited like the whole thing. Like this was his first time. So I mean,
he'd written reviews and video reviews before, but this was in terms of him editing, I guess, the video
did the
footage,
whole package, right? Yeah. It does blow my mind on so many levels, and I think that the thing about video games and opinions on video games and talking about video games is that. So we don't write reviews on this show. We just talk about games we've been playing, and
it's our feelings.
Are our opinions and feelings influenced by others? Sometimes I might say, because I'd say we're all playing a game that's part of some big hype train at the moment, and everyone's playing it, and I see other people on Twitter talking about it. I've definitely read other people's opinions on it. I'm not searching for those opinions; they just sort of appear. I might have them. If I share an opinion from someone else online, I usually try to say on the podcast, some have said, many have said, someone else said this view, and then
or even say like, hey, Dan Reichert said this thing, I agree with him, I also think this thing,
and I agree or I disagree. I wouldn't just say Dan Reichert's opinion and
you would cite it.
I'd try and cite it, and for everything else that is coming from me, I don't cite, because that's coming from me. But so what I'm saying is, if I was in the business of actually writing written reviews where there's a lot more importance on where citing of those views and where those views, I can't just sit, if I wrote in a written review, oh, Dan Reichert thought this thing about that game. That doesn't work. It works on the podcast because it's just a casual view of a game. Fine.
Right, exactly.
But when you're writing reviews, you really need to... One of his defenses was, he said that he knew lots of people who write video game reviews who do lots of research and then formulate their review. And I thought, what is he talking about? Like, the idea that reading other people's reviews and views on opinions on video games helps you write your own review it's the opposite. Like, there's no way I would be scared of reading anything just because it would taint my subconscious into typing stuff out that I might think is my opinion, but my brain has just read from someone else's. And that was the margin of error that I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt of, potentially, if it was one or two sentences. But the fact that it was obviously on all these reviews and in some cases literally copy and pasted, it's just not the case.
The most hilarious one is the video he does, which lifts whole cloth a post from NeoGAF about HD Rumble.
Yeah,
and the funniest thing about it is in the post, the guy says, "I believe that," or "I think that," and Filip uses the exact same like tonality that you would think of when reading it out, passing it off as if it's what he believes and he thinks. Right. And it's crazy. So watching that response video, I was at a point where I'm thinking, does he even understand that what he has done is plagiarism? Does he know what constitutes plagiarism?
I'm genuinely
convinced
he think
doesn't. It's wrong? Because the only explanation for me for this is that he literally has no idea that what he has been doing is wrong. Either that is what he's thinking, or he's just so past the point of caring that he doesn't view it as a bad thing anymore. He's like, yeah, I do it, whatever. It's not a big deal. But I feel like it's the former. I feel like he doesn't have the understanding or the concept that just taking people's words and twisting them slightly it's not a thing you do, and that's not something that you can do in a professional setting. And it's one of the biggest sins you can commit in journalism generally.
Right.
It's crazy that is how he viewed all of this.
I've seen a number of people saying writing video game reviews is easy. How on earth could he mess that up, sort of thing? And I kind of take issue with the idea that writing video game reviews is easy.
It's not at all. Like, it's very difficult. I've tried in the past to do videos like that.
Scripts. Right, exactly.
And articulate thoughts and things along those lines. And I
think having thoughts in the first place, that's obviously the easy bit.
Oh yeah,
I think the idea of writing a script or even a written review that is flowing and strategic and makes sense, that can absolutely be difficult. But what is mind-blowing is that he's plagiarized, it doesn't feel like he's plagiarized the form. Well, he has plagiarized the form factor, but it's like he doesn't have his own opinion, so he has to copy the opinion. And from everything that else that he's done online, it seems he's able to put things together. So this idea that like you would copy the opinion but not actually the way that you write the opinion is mad, because having an opinion on a video game is the easier bit.
I feel like he did both, like in a lot of the cases I've seen, it is copying the structure of the sentence, it is copying the order in which you say points. I do think that it's actually kind of an amalgam of not only the opinions but also the way in which the thing is written and the way that it's delivered. So I don't know, overall, this entire story is just kind of crazy. And I think the one thing that it should probably put into perspective for a lot of people is that this is a thing that doesn't happen in this industry, because if it did, this would be the reaction every time it does. And you could also argue that potentially maybe it has happened in other places before, but because it's so difficult these days to nail something like this down, they haven't been caught, or we don't know about it yet, because I feel like this is going to launch into a thing where a lot of people are going to be looking very closely at different places. I think already there was something from maybe it was some French or Spanish website that was copying Nintendo everything. That were plagiarizing. I was like, okay, well, maybe this is going to root people out at this point. And if there are people out there doing this should bloody well give them the shock to the system to say, hey, guess what? This is not a thing that you do. And this is not how...
I'm sure it exists in small pockets here and there on the internet. I think what's the incredible thing about this story is this is the Nintendo editor of IGN. Like, you don't get much higher than that when it comes to someone's opinion on Nintendo games in this industry. Like, that is very, very, very high up. And we've been talking about like what his reasoning was and all this, and sort of what's his response going to be. And when the response video came out and it was this, because before then I was like, this looks really bad, and I'm willing to like hear Filip's side of the story and just kind of, what was he thinking? I was like, does he have a deadline to hit and he's not able to hit it? So he's pressured under a lot of stress, wants to get the Dead Cells review done before the embargo, has to make sure he does it, but he couldn't finish it in time. So he goes to this video to, get some ideas that he could put down on paper that is a more kind of structured thing. That I was coming at it from that angle, being like, okay, I mean,
from my perspective, he had always seemed quite out of his depth at IGN, not only in terms of hosting NVC, but just generally with his viewpoints and the way that he carried himself. So I was willing to believe that. And then after everything else came out, I was like, clearly not. Clearly this guy is pathological in his plagiarism and just has a complete lack of understanding of what he has done.
That video apology, I expected it to be so many obvious things, like you said, like, it was a tight deadline, I was under this pressure, I apologize for what I've done, I have plagiarized. That was the crucial part that was lacking. And there was a faint-hearted apology to his co-workers at IGN. There was a faint-hearted apology to the developer of Dead Cells, which was a very unusual one, I thought, in the grand scheme of things. Yes.
I don't think that one's relatively unusual. I think the fact that you have disrespected their game by not even, playing it to its fullest and giving your opinion.
I don't think they're as high up on the list as Filip's followers, as well as Boomstick Gaming. I think they had to be the priority above the developer of the game, of the review that he plagiarized. I agree, you absolutely need to apologize to them, but to leave out any apology that was for any viewers, listeners of IGN, and to say that you have the utmost respect to Boomstick Gaming without an apology. The phrase "have the utmost respect." If you had the utmost respect, you wouldn't have done this to Boomstick Gaming.
Right?
That's the maddening thing.
Yeah,
and it was like, what is this apology video? It's so awful and fake, and the little bit of like sympathy I had.
But it also follows a formula, right? Like you look at him and you see someone who has tried to mold a channel that is based around algorithms and a formula and a YouTube way of making money. The way he begins the video with a sigh, like it's a very patented YouTube style of apology video where you don't actually apologize, but you make it feel like you are apologizing, and it gets fans every time, hook, line, and sinker. There's a famous apology video from one of the guys who ran the CSGO gambling site thing that Jim Sterling covered, where he like has his cute dog in it, and he's like using the dog as a foil for the bad things that he's done, being like, look at me, I'm so nice, I have a cute dog. And there is a style and formula to manipulating your audience on YouTube, and he clearly has read a lot about how to do that and the algorithms. And there was even someone in the Reset Era thread, I think I read a couple of days ago, saying that like clearly all his videos, you look back and you see him trying out different types of personalities, trying to think what works on YouTube, trying to kind of mold his presence to be something that he could leverage into making money. And yeah, it's sad. This whole story it's awful. It's tragic. It's just the worst thing that can possibly happen. It ruins IGN's reputation, and God, for all the trolls who talk about IGN, you can't spell ignorant without IGN, they have a goddamn field day now in terms of something real and tangible to throw at them, and that sucks. That sucks for everyone who works there. It sucks for the just reputation of the company generally. But what I will say is that IGN acted in the best possible way, which was, as soon as the allegation came up, was like they removed the review. They investigated it. They fired him. They said they'd re-review it. They did re-review it and put it out a week later. And they handled it about as best you can in a situation like this, which is it's pretty hard to deal with. I guess
it's a bad situation, and yeah, has there been justice? Absolutely. But if this guy like shows up on the internet in any video game capacity, it's not going to feel great, and like it's probably quite likely to happen. He's probably going to reboot his YouTube channel, and he still has surprisingly a following and like people who support him online, and that I don't want to engage in like just a battle against these people. I just want to say that how perhaps misinformed they are about this situation.
But like that's the majority of a YouTube audience. Like I think you will have people who followed him before IGN who liked his stuff, and they would have seen that apology video, and it would have been like, oh, that's a shame. He seems like a nice guy still, and they would have continued to watch him and listen to him. That's the way the YouTube audiences work generally, is that they, outside of the sphere that they live within, the bubble that they're in, they don't see a lot. They're very casual.
And they don't care about the integrity of video game reviews. They're just there to hear about HD Rumble in the Switch Joy-Con.
Exactly. They want to know, what are the top 5 Switch games that came out in March? Tell me, please, because I can't do the research myself, because, that's just the way that audience works, is like they go there for a certain thing, and they get that certain thing. And yeah, to me, it really damages the chances of anyone trying to get a major job at a publication like IGN coming from a YouTube background. It means it's going to be a lot more scrutiny in terms of that stuff, I think, for sure. And I think there's going to be a lot of people, especially if they do come from that background, having to be looked at more closely and make sure that they aren't untoward, or that they know ethics, that they have some degree of understanding about like what a journalist is supposed to do, because as much as these roles are so video and podcast focused these days, a lot of IGN's bread and butter is still in their articles and their writing, and that's a lot of what they do still to this day. So you have to have some kind of idea of how to engage in a job like that. So yeah, it's boy, I don't know. There's not a lot to say other than plagiarism is fucking awful. You should never do it. Don't do it. And I don't know how to stop this situation, because trying to find, as we said, from a video, the words and phrases is next to impossible when there's just a flood and a sea of stuff out there on the internet to be looked at.
Yeah. And like IGN are hiring for other jobs, but of those jobs, one of them at the moment isn't Nintendo editor. So they might always go internal. We don't know, but
they could do. Yeah. It's a small pool to choose from in terms of seasoned people who could take that job. I think that's why they had trouble in the first place. It was like 4 months until they found someone. And I honestly have no idea how he got hired in the first place, considering his background, his knowledge base, and like all this stuff that should have been red flags. Things that to me were red flags because I know a YouTuber versus a journalist, and how they think about things and their priorities. The biggest red flag to me actually was the first video that he did after he got the job, where the literal title of the video is "I'm joining forces with IGN." He doesn't say I got hired by IGN. He doesn't say I have a job at IGN, I'm now working for them. He says I'm joining forces, which to me meant that he thought that his job was going to be, he could still do his YouTube channel, and he was going to be able to do things that he did at IGN on his YouTube channel. It just shows a complete... I definitely think he just had a complete... After this entire thing, him not knowing what plagiarism is, I feel like he had just a complete lack of understanding of what the position he was put into, you know? Like, completely out of his depth in almost every way. And that's a shame, but also like, dude, don't fucking plagiarize, you know? Yeah. Anyway, I don't know what they're going to do after this. There's
and NBC the last couple of weeks has been considerably better. But it could always be even better if they had that extra Jose Otero slot taken up by someone who was as great as Jose. I think they can recover. But yeah, there's some way to go yet, I think.
Definitely. So yeah, I don't know. There's not really much else you can say on this subject other than, you know, fuck plagiarism. And yeah, hopefully this just never happens again. It's a big wake up call for I think a lot of people, because there wasn't anything in place to stop this. I think Brian Altano said in one of his posts, like, you work in video games because you love them, and like you write about them because you have a passion for them. And if you're trying to get into this for money, like, what the fuck are you doing? Because there's no money in this anyway. It's all about your passion and what you enjoy.
But maybe that's the answer to the question. Like, there is money in this if you're a YouTuber and
potentially
you become a really big YouTuber. There's a lot of money potentially, but that's mainly more into streamers. But that's a separate conversation. But
yeah,
you're right. If you're
in traditional media background jobs, like, they don't pay particularly well. So
and yeah, exactly. So it's a bizarre situation, and hopefully doesn't happen again.
Bizarre hardly begins to describe it, but yeah, just one of the most apt words you can use, I guess. So, anyway, a bit of a downer, but I guess we're gonna come back after this break, and we'll talk about something to lift us up, a bit more positive note, because Super Smash Bros. Direct happened. Boy, howdy! There's a lot of stuff to talk about from that. So, don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this break. Alright folks, welcome back to the third and final part of today's show, wherein we're going to be talking about that Smash Brothers Direct that happened, where they unveiled a bunch of new characters, told us some more details about some modes, hinted at some things which the internet has done some detective work on, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Bally, from a just general perspective, how did you feel after coming out of this Super Smash Brothers Direct?
Almost as hyped as E3 itself, I think. I think that the strength of the character reveals, the number of stages and tracks listed, and stuff like the assist trophies looking great. I just think that it was a real culmination of everything you would hope for in a Smash Direct. And the best thing is that we're only in August, so what on earth is going to happen? What on earth are they going to announce with this game between now and when this game eventually does come out in December? Like it felt like this was an incredibly impressive Direct to have so early in terms of length of time to wait until this game's coming out.
Yeah, I think the thing to say most of all is the more we see of this game, the less we can say, oh, it's just a port of the Wii U game. Because it's clearly not in like any way. There are a lot of differences that they already showed us at E3. There are all these new characters being added. There's so many different types of ways to play, and they are hinting at a brand new mode that is definitely not going to be stupid fucking board game where you go around and no one knows what the hell's going on. So from that perspective, I was delighted by this Direct. I thought that overall the character reveals were very strong for me personally, and some of the Echo characters I'm like, okay, whatever, sure, but there is definitely going to be more stuff than we probably expected. And I think Sakurai was saying, please don't expect too many more characters, and I'm not expecting the world. I seriously think that there's maybe only 2 or 3 more left before the game comes out,
and that's great.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's really all I needed, honestly, because everything else that is going into this game seems really great. So let's start off talking about some of the characters, and we kicked it off with the Castlevania reveal, which has one of my favorite reveal trailers that they've ever done in Smash Brothers, in which Luigi is running around the castle, finding all the different monsters from the Castlevania series in comical fashion, and then is summarily murdered by Death himself with a scythe across his chest as his spirit is ripped from his lifeless corpse. And then you cut to Simon Belmont, and it's like, yes, we expected this because there was, I think it was, they changed the name of a YouTube soundtrack video, and someone picked that up, and it was like Castlevania 1, so everyone was like, oh, clearly they're doing a Castlevania character tomorrow. A lot of people had always been speculating it was going to be Simon Belmont. ended up being Simon Belmont. But I think the fun thing about it is not only the reveal trailer was fantastic, but then halfway through, we get Richter Belmont as well, an Echo character of Simon, who I personally kind of prefer in terms of design and look. And also, Richter's very iconic in the series. You play as him in Rondo of Blood, and he is he's the start of Symphony of the Night, because the cool thing about Symphony of the Night is it opens where Rondo of Blood ends. So you literally play the ending of Rondo of Blood at the start of Symphony of the Night.
Oh, cool.
And then after that, like, boss fight, it's like a boss fight that you have to win, basically. You switch over to Alucard and you start playing as Alucard in the castle. So I have an affinity more so for Richter, I think, as a fan of Symphony of the Night, more than the original Castlevania. But I think having both of them there is so cool. And it was the added surprise of having Richter show up and be like, oh, wait, there's more. And we didn't think there would be, which was very cool.
I think this trailer just showed Nintendo can make an incredibly impressive cinematic little piece, you might say. This was maybe the best yet in terms of cinematography and editing, and like it was. There's a magic to these little mini films that they've done with all these reveals that just adds so much to the Smash Brothers hype train and how excited everyone's getting about this game.
Yeah, it's brilliant in so many ways. There's the comedy to it, there's the great reveals, everything is just like so perfectly placed, and it really makes me hope that there is some more of that in the game, in the sense that, you know, this mode that people are thinking is going to have some relation to, all these deaths that are happening in these trailers. Is it going to have some of those kind of subspace style cutscenes in it? How much of a single player mode is it going to be? And what are we doing in it? Because there's lots of speculation going on. I think people had decoded what it said, and it said spirits with like an icon of kind of a spirit above it. So people are reading into the idea that Mario and Megaman were murdered in the Ridley trailer. The fact that I guess DDD kind of maybe got murdered by K. Rool at the end there. And obviously Luigi is just dead. So I think that the idea being that there's going to be some kind of boss fight mode to some degree that might involve characters being killed and coming back, and I have no idea what it's going to be, but a lot of people are just kind of speculating right now. And we also have the idea that they showed later on the Rathalos from Monster Hunter on a stage that isn't pictured in all the 103 stages. Yeah. And it's just a flat landscape, and it reminds a lot of people of stuff from Subspace Emissary, like when you had a boss fight against Ridley, or when you had the boss fight against Rayquaza. It's not a traditional Smash Brothers stage. So, yeah, I do wonder how that fits in. And obviously there was the Dracula boss fight as well. So we're seeing multiple boss fights that are coming into this game. How do you access those boss fights? And where do you go to fight these characters? Because when you saw the Dracula boss fight, it was actually a completely different room from the Castlevania stage that they had shown previously. So
I mean,
yeah,
it could be a changing stage potentially. It might be a Castlevania stage
maybe.
that swaps between two different rooms of the castle. I don't know, but
yeah, that would seem a little bit weird potentially, especially because they have the transforming thing that we can talk about in a bit. But yeah, I think that there is definitely something up with that. And whether it just ends up being some boss rush mode, or if there's something more deep there that has a level of storytelling to it, I really hope for the latter, because though Sakurai in the past has said things like, oh, everyone just uploaded the Subspace videos to YouTube, so all my work was wasted, which I think is
his
stupid.
view might have changed. That quote was
quite
a long time ago.
Honestly, like, looking at everything in this game, Sakurai's viewpoint changing is definitely something I can take into consideration, considering the minute details. Yeah, the details of all the kind of things that competitive players want, like the ability to dodge to the side in midair, the fact that the training stage in this game has fucking graph paper behind it, and when you hit a character, it shows you the trajectory that they would go at 100% and at 0% and at different percentages. It basically is a workshop for competitive players to refine and practice and more easily get feedback on what they're doing, like hitbox style things and things like that. it is actually kind of crazy that he has lent into it in that way, because from the history of Sakurai, what we know is that he's never been a big fan of competitive Smash Brothers. He's always talked about the game from a more fun, casual perspective, and that he likes it being accessible to as many people as possible. So the idea that he is catering to that crowd in so many different ways kind of makes me feel like, he may have curtailed on his idea of not wanting to do a big story mode with cutscenes because it'll just get uploaded to YouTube. And I wonder, I don't know, maybe just that the times have changed in that sense, that everything is on YouTube and you can't stop it and you just got to deal with it, basically. Because that's just video games in 2018.
Yeah. Like, are there going to be people who just want to see those cutscenes who have no interest in Smash Brothers, potentially? Would they have bought Smash Brothers otherwise? Maybe, but I think that the more characters that they are including in this game, especially the villains, and the idea of villains working together and teaming up against the good guys, and the number of stories and worlds that you can relate to, is so much greater with this game than when Subspace Emissary was in Brawl. That it's just crying out for something story related. I think, even if that does mean some sort of boss rush mode, but there's like a tangential story at the same time, Right,
that kind of fits it together with cutscenes in between. And
elements of Subspace were like that, where there were bosses, but there were also those fairly dull, boring Kirby-esque stages that you'd just sort of platform through. But something that could maybe incorporate more of the boss fights and less of the random platforming might be more fun to play.
I definitely think they should remove anything related to walking through a stage. That was the weakest part of Subspace. Sakurai, I feel, knows how to make a game like Smash Brothers. When it comes to level design in a platformer, the Kirby games have never been very strong in that sense from my perspective, and so when he kind of applies that ethos to this game and this style, it just didn't work in the Subspace Emissary. It was a slog in a lot of ways, and so I didn't really enjoy it. So I would say cut that stuff. But if you do have like cutscenes that interpose between boss fights and regular fights, where you're kind of just doing, the fun Smash Brothers things, maybe even bringing, event match style ideas into that kind of mode could be a good idea as well, to just kind of link it all together. So hopefully it is something significant, and it seems like they're teasing that it's going to be something significant. I imagine in another Smash Brothers Direct we'll have before launch, they'll talk about what that is and what's involved in it, and they'll go much deeper about it, and hopefully, then we'll all be satisfied and be like, okay, yes, this is kind of what we want out of this. And hopefully, because it is the ultimate Smash Brothers, that's what he wants to do, is give it to us in that sense. Other things, let's talk about some of the Echo characters that were revealed. We have, obviously, Richter as an Echo of Simon. I've said I'll probably play more Richter than Simon. I think overall, if we're just talking about Simon and Richter, they're just so perfectly made. The walk animation is identical. The way they jump in the air, the fact that you're taking from Super Castlevania 4, the fact that the whip can go all crazy and just you can like kind of spin it around in different directions and block projectiles, that it goes in multiple directions. Just, I think as characters they look really fun to play, and they feel like a style that I would enjoy playing. So I'm very, very excited to play them. And obviously, like, they do the super obvious specials that I would have said that should be specials, which, because they're specials in their game as well, which is the axe throw, the holy water, the boomerang, all that stuff is perfectly implemented.
Yeah, he seems really unique in that he's definitely a slow heavyweight, but has quite a range of projectiles. And the only other like heavyweight I can think of who has any sort of projectile is someone like King Day, where he can sort of
the stupid spiky assholes that you
chuck the spikes. So like I think that combination could be really cool, and the range of the whip just looks insane, where the spacing and the things that you have to factor in with Simon Belmont is probably going to be quite tricky to fight. Although we've like us, when we're playing as competitively as we do, I wouldn't say we play competitively, but we try to play competitively with each other. We kind of shy away from the heavyweights more often than not, but I enjoy getting a good old Donkey Kong smash on you every now and then. But so Simon Belmont could be interesting in that sense, that we're not used to playing heavyweights as much.
Yeah, and I definitely want to make like Richter one of my main characters that I play as. So
you think Richter is just as heavy as Simon? He's no faster or anything?
I think they're probably pretty identical. It seems like there's not a big difference between the two. But yeah, I tend to like playing as Echo versions. Like I love playing as Lucina. I like playing more as Dark Pit than Pit. I'm just like that. I don't know why. I feel like you should, play as the underdog sometimes. So that's what I go for. And then the other Echoes were Crom from Fire Emblem, who apparently is an echo of Roy, but his up B is Ike's up B. It seems like he's kind of an amalgamation of all the Fire Emblem sword users.
We had an email about Crom. Shall we dive in?
Yes, we can bring that up.
So Max from Massachusetts
there
says, "Hello, this Nintendo Life crew. As you already know, a Super Smash Bros. Nintendo Direct aired last week that revealed a ton of incredible information. While I could talk for hours about the 2 Castlevania reps and the heavily requested King K rule, one of the most surprising announcements for me was the inclusion of Crom. Not only did he get his chance another day, but he is also the first amalgamation Echo fighter we've seen, borrowing moves from both Roy and Ike. So with this in mind, what other amalgamation Echo fighters could you see being announced in the future? I think Dixie Kong as a Diddy Echo would work especially well if she had Donkey Kong's recovery. Keep up the great podcast."
Yeah. I feel like there are going to be a bunch more Echo characters announced. Someone made the idea that every character would have an Echo, and I was like, Jesus, that seems a bit obscene, but I wouldn't put it past Sakurai to do something like that. So I could definitely see it happening. I feel like you'd have to pull from series that have multiple characters in order to do an amalgamation, right? So for Dixie, having her hair spin is kind of like Donkey Kong, but then having her main kind of melee moves be more like Diddy makes sense.
Apparently,
mashing those together.
So Wolf was the last character added, I believe, for Brawl, and his moveset is actually an amalgamation of like 3 or 4 different specials from like different characters. I can't remember which ones off the top of my head, but essentially none of his moves are original, and it was thought that he was kind of rushed into the game last minute, and rather than creating a unique move set, they just sort of piled in some moves from other characters onto him. So it's definitely possible that very last minute you can just kind of do hybrids of characters, and I think the idea of Dixie with being a Diddy Echo with the DK recovery would be a good one. There's loads more, I think. I don't know, but I think
one that comes to mind for me is Toon Zelda, where you could have her basically be Zelda, but also I think some of the things in terms of animation and stuff you can draw from Toon Link, and maybe throw some of his things in there. That would be
and
maybe a little bit
smaller and lighter, a bit like Toon Link as well.
Yeah, maybe. And also because like Tetra as a character, I guess she would be Tetra as opposed to Toon Zelda, right? Because that would make a lot more sense. Tetra as a character, I think, would have some Zelda stuff, some Link stuff, because she's a pirate, so she'd maybe have some more physical, like, melee attacks she could do. Or she could be a wholly unique character all to herself, but that's one that comes to mind for me. There's lots of other characters that you could do. Any other Echoes that come to mind that you think?
I mean, Shadow is a definite shout at being an Echo.
Yes.
But rather than copying some of Sonic's moves, maybe he could get his gun out.
Had
in that spin-off game. And,
yes!
That could be
what would be fun for Shadow as well is because he rides a motorcycle, you could give him Wario's motorbike as well as another move, so that could be fun for that.
That's one of the most derpy moves in the whole of Smash Brothers. That bike is hilarious.
Yeah, it is pretty great in that sense. Raiden for Snake, potentially. He is a character who, again, hasn't really had much of a history on Nintendo platforms like Snake, but he is a character that could be pretty similar. He has a sword, though, so he could borrow some sword moves from some of the sword characters. That could be a thing. I feel like, yes, a lot of these Echoes, like amalgamation ones, could happen. But I don't feel like there's a huge difference there between that and just a straight-up clone. I mean, there's like some customization available to you, and imagine if like there was a bit further customization in terms of regular characters, like there was in the Wii U version, where you could unlock special different moves and make it slightly different. So they could add that in again.
And I do like the amount of focus or lack of focus put on Echo's fighters in these directs. I like that the big announcements, the original fighters are like these big things, and then the Echo fighters, as cool as they are just kind of these side announcements. So when it's this sort of side announcement for, Dark Samus is in the game, you're like, oh, that's cool. But then you realize, oh, she or it or he or whatever you want to call Dark Samus has this, like, she hovers and has all these different animations. That's like, in my mind, is like this really cool bonus where they didn't really have to do that. They could have just gotten away probably with Dark Samus in that outfit, but the added inclusion of her hovering and shooting, like, I think she's got like dark matter she shoots,
and she has like different taunts and stuff like that, so
it adds so much. I think that's just, it's really cool.
So they set them apart through animation and distinct kind of style in that sense, as opposed to the moves themselves, so it makes
and they don't make a big deal of it. It's just like this cool bonus thing. It feels like, it doesn't feel like, oh, and here comes Dark Samus and she does all this thing. It's just like, oh yeah, we're throwing in Dark Samus, and you know, we thought the animation should look like this. I thought that was very impressive.
So one that I thought, so when I first watched the King K. Rool trailer, because we had been playing Punch-Out recently, the first thing I thought of when the shadow showed up was actually King Hippo from Punch-Out, and not King K. Rool. So that was one where I was like, oh, he could maybe have some moves that are similar to Little Mac in terms of punching, but he could borrow from other heavyweights too, and he could take some moves from them. But I think, honestly, if they were to put another like Punch-Out big villain in the game, they should make them as unique as possible, because you can draw so much from that series in terms of the moves that they use, and like the tells that they have and things like that. So I think there's a lot of history from generally that franchise that you could make a wholly unique character as opposed to an Echo. But yeah, I don't know. King Hippo was the first thing that came to my mind, and I was like, oh, wait a second, we're in Donkey Kong Land. Of course it's freaking King K. Rool. That makes actual sense, as opposed to me not knowing. I think I was one of the last people to realize it was King K. Rool, honestly. Like, right up until, like, DDD was, like, being a troll. I was like, what's going on here? And then he, like, burst out. I'm like, oh, right, yes, clearly. Just wasn't thinking about it in any way.
That was a damn good reveal. It was
great.
I think at the time I thought this could be Dixie, but no, they're going villains. It's happening.
Well, it was also because the screen was shaking. Like, Dixie wouldn't make the screen shake. Like, that doesn't make much sense. So we had Chrom, we had Dark Samus. Both seemed pretty cool in their own ways. I feel like Chrom just adds to the ever-growing list of Fire Emblem Sword characters who are all literally the same. It's so weird that it's like he's an echo of Roy, because in Melee, Roy is basically an echo of Marth, just like slightly different. I think they have changed Roy in ways to make Roy more unique, but at a base level, Roy, Marth, and Lucina are the same character with slight variations. And so having Chrom now as a fourth version of that same character, it just seems a little bit over the top. And it makes me feel like, come on, guys, where's our axe user? Where's our lance user? Where's like a Pegasus Knight that you could put into this game? Like, there are so many unique, interesting, different types of characters in Fire Emblem, and you just put in Chrom again. And, you know, as I've said, like, these are Echo characters, so it's not like they're putting a lot of effort into them, but it just, even as someone who loves Fire Emblem and is a big Fire Emblem fan, do we really need Chrom in this game? Probably not. But he's there, so, you know, enjoy. And we've gone from having one Metroid representative to now having 3 in the game, with Dark Samus and with Ridley. So that's pretty cool. The number of stages up to 103. I love the way that they showed that, like squeezing it up to the top and then bursting through and being like, we're crazy, aren't we, guys? Sakurai's like, we're insane people. I'm like, yes, you are, definitely. Seems the one that's missing that I wish would come back, which we played all the time in Melee, Poker Floats.
Where's Poker Floats?
I love it.
That stage was so damn good.
Yeah, it was It's one of those stages that's like an auto-scroller, like Rainbow Road or whatever, that were annoying to play in some senses, but back in the day, I think we really enjoyed just... I enjoyed just seeing giant Pokemon and we would stand on them. I just found that very fun.
But there was stuff like the Slowpoke's tail would curl out into a straight line, and that would lead the way and where you're meant to go next. Sort of thing. So they have taken out all of the vertical scrolling stages, I believe.
Yes, I know ice climbers, climb the mountain one, and stuff like that.
There's some DK one as well. But so maybe Poker Floats was just a bit too vertically scrolling. But then there is. Big Blue.
Like it was going like across and down and like all over the place. Poker Floats, So,
but something like Big Blue, I thought maybe that just goes left to right, but I don't know.
We've got a new stage for Mario Odyssey, the New Donk City Town Hall, which
strong.
It looks. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of it because it's just going up and down the building. It's not really going all the way around New Donk City.
Well, I've heard some people say they wish, and I agree with this idea, that they wish it was at nighttime, during the festival.
I mean, that could be a version of the stage. We don't know yet. Sakurai tends to do things like that, like with KK Slider. If you play the game at the same time as you would in Animal Crossing, like he appears and does stuff in the stage and stuff like that. So there's the option for it to be variable in that sense. It could be a part of the stage. Sometimes it turns to night potentially, or even I would love a Mario Odyssey stage that just jumped around different places and just went different places. Talking of stages, I think the idea that they introduced this choose two stages and it'll just transmorph between two of them at random points is a very neat idea, and one that we'll probably try quite a bit.
I like how we could both pick characters and then we say, to make it fair, you pick half the stage and I pick the other half of the stage.
Yes,
and that way I can pick anything I want and it doesn't matter. It's fair because you can pick anything that will screw me up, and likewise.
Yes.
And it's like the idea of doing home and away, but combining it into one stage.
So you can just choose Big Blue to troll me, and then I can just choose some other stage.
Troll you back with this stage. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a clever idea, and the idea that there's now not just there's Battlefield as well as Final Destination is a nice touch.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. That's good. And also we have returning stages like Fountain of Dreams, which is brilliant. I love Fountain of Dreams. It's a great stage that needed to come back, and it looks really good now. They showed a side-by-side comparison.
Some of these stages have been so cleanly revamped. They look incredible.
Did you see Bridge of Eldin from Twilight Princess? The side-by-side. I was like, wow, they really did a number on that one in a way that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah. No, Game Explain in true Game Explain fashion did a comparison of every single stage.
Oh, did they? Okay.
In the trailer. So
yeah. And then we have the music, which up to 900 tracks if you include all the fanfares and victory tunes and mini songs like that, but 800 kind of regular. The Castlevania ones, when they showed that, it was 34, and I was like, holy shit, they're really going all in on that music, which is a good choice, might I say, because Castlevania has maybe the best soundtrack of the NES era in terms of classic songs, and obviously as it went on there was more and more amazing ones, but stuff like Bloody Tears and Vampire Killer is just they're such good tunes that are so humble and memorable. So having remixes of all of those is amazing,
and you can listen to them on the go.
You can, just like you used to be able to do on 3DS. I think you could plug it in and do that as well. Nintendo have always kind of done this with their handheld, tried to find ways of you listening to stuff while it's closed, or doing stuff while it's closed.
I think they started with the DSi. They did something.
Yes, there was something on DSi. I can't recall what it was, but they definitely had a way for you to shut the system and still listen.
MP3s onto an SD card, stick it in the DSi, and listen to those on the go.
Exactly. I think it was something along those lines. Yeah, you're right. This is nothing new for them. I think a lot of people are like, oh, wow, that's a cool idea. It's no, they've kind of been doing this for all their handhelds for a while. But yeah. Having 28 hours of music is just absurd. How are they going to fit all of that on a cartridge? I don't know. Because file size limits, a lot of it's going to be taken up by this music, clearly, because there's a lot of it. And I think the idea of the new menus, they look much slicker, more refined. I still don't understand what Games and More is, or why it's called Games and More, or it really just doesn't make any sense, and it still doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
but that's...
I mean, that's where trophies were, I think, on the Wii U version, and
I don't think
sort of thing.
Was it because was the vault separate from that, or was that a separate thing? It was all a bit messy in terms of the menu design.
Was the vault in Games and More? I can't remember.
Because Games and More is like classic mode and also home run derby and also training, and it's like, what do these have in common at all? It's just like, it's kind of like a dumping ground for all the other stuff that isn't Smash Brothers, isn't the kind of trophy place, and isn't the main single player mode.
I think there might be a return to those little 30-second, 5-minute demos of like loads of classic
maybe
games.
Yeah, I don't at this point. I'm unsure if
this
that's
is how
something
they get
Nintendo want to
Virtual
do.
Console onto Switch.
Yeah, it's always through Smash Brothers, isn't it? It's just constantly. Maybe this time you have to connect to the online service in order to access them, because of their service that is going to be using that. But
coming late September.
Yeah. And then we have some other kind of modes. Classic mode is back in kind of the more traditional format, because I think the Wii U version, where you like moved your amiibo style character across to different matches and chose which one you wanted to do, was not great. It was fine. It was pretty boring. But I like the idea of a traditional classic mode where the fights are predestined. You know what you're going to be going into, and
they're all around
built
the theme,
specifically,
which is cool. So like,
yes.
I think one of the Fire Emblem characters, it said like, oh, they're all going to be sword users, sort of thing.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many sword users in this game to pick from, so I think
Definitely.
that's like how that run goes, basically.
And then we have this mode called Squad Strike, which is basically you can do 3 versus 3 or 5 versus 5 matches. I don't know if that's like Soul Calibur, like 8 versus 8 team battle, where when you take out one character, you'll keep your health and they start with the new character and you go from there. Because I really like that mode. But if it's just like you fight one match and then you fight another match until everyone wins and it's just like knockout elimination, that's less interesting to me, because you could just do that regularly if it's just like, back-to-back matches.
But I think if it's knockout stock and then the second the character gets knocked out, your next character comes in, that's fine. That
in that case, if it's just like you have one stock per character or something along those lines, then that is more along the Soul Calibur model, because it's like you retain the percentage damage that you've kept, right, and they bring in the next character like that. I really like that idea personally.
That's how I understood it, but I'll be disappointed. I agree.
Hopefully it is like that, because that's the
great.
kind of
we can get because we rotate between loads of characters all the time.
Yes.
We could get like our top 5, and
yes,
we can be like, I'm not playing well enough for this guy at the moment.
And there's tactics to it as well, because you can save your better characters till later and like bring them out and have a comeback and stuff like that. So
great.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. Hopefully it works like we think it will. Tournament mode is back, which is cool for big gatherings and stuff. And then a bunch of items. So the Death Scythe from Castlevania, which Ness was shown to be using and murdering people, which is a great image.
You once you're past a certain amount of damage.
Rage Blaster, which does more damage if you are higher percentage. We've got Abra. Ditto is a great pick for a Pokemon, because he just transforms into whoever is there.
It's such a good example of how ultimate this game is, because they have to sort of re-render models of every single fighter in the form of Ditto in order for that Pokemon to work.
Yes, exactly.
Which is
like
insane.
they have to basically put that pink skin on literally every character, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
And again, also, I want to know what Kirby swallowing up King K. Rool looks like, and also Kirby swallowing Richter and Simon looks like. Because I've already seen Kirby swallowing Ridley, and he kind of just has a Ridley hat on top, and I'm a little bit disappointed by it.
Right.
So my favorite trophies from Melee were the Kirby hat trophies, where it was just like 5
They're going to have to have
Kirbys.
about 30 of them now, because of all the characters.
It's more than that even. Like, Jesus, it's crazy. Loads of Kirby hat trophies. Please give me all those.
Did they have those in the last game?
I don't think they did. I think they cut them from Wii U, which is a shame, because they were some of my favorites.
I think they were in Brawl. That might be the last game they were in.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe they got to the point where it's like, this is stupid. We can't do this.
This is stupid.
Yeah. And then some assist trophies, which deconfirm some characters that people might have wanted. So Knuckles is an assist trophy. We've got Zero from Mega Man X, Grey Fox from Metal Gear Solid, and sadly for you, Bally, Shovel Knight. He's not a character, but he is in the game.
I disagree. This is the end. This isn't the end.
So do you think that like in the next Smash Brothers after this one that Shovel Knight will be playable?
I
Is
think
that your
this
end
one
game
he could
here?
be playable.
That's not happening.
I
That's
think there's a
definitely
chance.
No, just like Waluigi, you're wrong.
I'll place a bet with you right now if you want. I think Waluigi will be playable in this game.
Waluigi will be playable. I thought we were going to go with Shovel Knight.
Well, Waluigi's an assist trophy as well. So
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Well, are you confident that neither of them will be playable?
They are not going to be playable. They're assist trophies.
Well,
they've already been put in this game. This game's coming out in December. It's
right. I'll
happening.
place a bet now. I think Waluigi will be playable come launch.
Do you come launch? Because my idea would be that he would be DLC later down the line once Sakurai has realized that people want him in the game. That's the only way I see Waluigi getting in here is down the line as DLC.
I'll stick with launch. I think it's
you're going to say, look, what are the terms for this bet? What's going to have to happen?
We'll have to think about those.
All right, we'll have a think about it. I'll accept your bet, and we'll think about the terms for the loser and what has to happen. So that'll be fun. But yeah, that's in stone now. So if Waluigi isn't there at launch, then something's going to have to happen. We also have the moon from Majora's Mask, which is a fucking great assist trophy. It just crashes into the stage and explodes everything, which is cool. And as we mentioned before, like Rathalos is an assist trophy, but also a boss. So yeah, lots of new stuff in terms of all the nonsense that Smash Brothers is known for, and I'm sure we'll dive into a lot of that stuff when we play. One of my favorite additions, though, is the Final Smash stuff, because they have amended it so that you can now choose a Final Smash being a meter that you fill up, and it's not as powerful, but it still does like the move. So it's kind of like a more traditional fighting game where you build up to a super and then you can just pull off that super when you want to, which takes away the randomness of the Smash Ball flying around.
So this is Sakurai just sort of dangling the carrot, I guess, saying, hey, competitive scene, if you did want to use the Smash Ball.
Exactly, like it's yet more proof that Sakurai has changed his thinking in terms of.
But do you think the competitive scene will take to it? Do you think they might
I think they'll try it out at least, because it is something that, like Street Fighter has supers, like a lot of traditional fighting games have that mechanic in them, and they are used in tournaments, and they are built into.
And it builds up based on how much you're hitting your opponent.
Yeah, I don't know how it'll work specifically in Smash Brothers, but it will increase at whatever rate dependent, I imagine. And then you can just use. I think it would be a great way for us to play, honestly, like having the option to have Final Smashes, because Final Smashes are really great fun, and I love the animations for them, but there was a bit of a randomness to it, and they were a little overpowered. So the idea that they are being toned down in terms of how strong they are, but also that you can build them up as an additional thing, is a good call. And I think that it's something that I'll really enjoy, and we can mess around with some more. So yeah. And then obviously the final reveal was King K. Rool as the character, which, as we've already said, like I thought didn't have any idea until the last minute. I was like, oh, that's cool, they actually did it. They put King K. Rool in the game, and having now played the original Donkey Kong Country, I can much more appreciate like what he is as a character in terms of his moveset. I think there's stuff from Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3 that's like the jetpack and the blaster gun that I haven't seen, but seeing him throw his crown, I was like, yes, that's like looking at that and imagining the animation from the original, it's almost identical. Like they've perfectly captured that part of his character, which is.
And he's actually another heavyweight with a projectile. I should also mention.
Yes, I guess unusual.
So. The King K. Rool like battle theme from DKC1.
Oh, it's so good.
Such a good song. Such a good song. So that better be in this game. Well, it must be because it was playing while
they literally played it, so it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Very, very cool. I think there was always a chance that big bad from Tropical Freeze might usurp him, but I think King K. Rool's a much better shout.
Definitely, yeah, and he's more recognizable. He's someone who people have also been clamoring for. He's someone that, keeps this train rolling in terms of Sakurai giving everyone what they want. He gave us Ridley. He's given us Simon and Richter. He even gave Crom to the people who wanted Crom in the game, whoever those people are. And now he has given us King K. Rool, which the list is getting slimmer and slimmer in terms of people asking for characters and them happening. there was a screenshot that was tweeted out, I think, from the Smash Brothers Japanese account that had the perspective of the Golden Sun battle screen, and so now people are thinking that maybe Isaac from Golden Sun is being potentially a character.
It is a very
because he was an
distinctive
assist trophy
camera
in
angle.
Brawl as well, so we've had the history of him being an assist trophy in the past. And I think you can make him a really interesting character because a lot of the magic stuff in Golden Sun is stuff you use outside of battles. So like the hand that pushes things away, and like other things. I think you like freeze blocks and tiles, so you can. There's a lot of magic stuff that can be implemented into his character, so that he's not a boring sword person. And you have the Jinn as well, which are like the kind of weird little magical creatures that give them their powers in Golden Sun. So there's a lot you could do with Isaac as a character. Whether that happens or not, I don't know, because there's potential for anything at this point.
If only we gave a top 5 list of our most wanted Smash Brothers characters, Nbz.
Oh, if only, Bally, that would be great. Yes, you are, of course, referring to our latest Patreon episode of TNL Ranks, which you can get for $2 if you head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, where we give our top 5 most desired Smash Brothers characters in some lists that are quite different from each other, but also very funny. And I think we had some good picks for sure. Yeah. So yeah, you can go check that out. And also, I guess we're closing out the show now. We'd like to thank all our people who support us on Patreon for being able to do shows like that. Bally, who are our patrons that we would like to support, thank the most.
The two patrons we want to thank the most are my girlfriend Caroline and Atari Alex. They are both $10 tier patrons. Thank you so much for your support. But thank you to all of our patrons. We absolutely massively appreciate the support. And as we said, yeah, check out that latest episode of TNL Ranks, where we talk about our top 5 Smash Brothers characters that we want to see the most. And for $2, you can also download all previous episodes, so you get all 5 episodes for $2.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find that at patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife. You can find us in various other places. We're on Twitter, at TNL Podcast. That's where you can go to find links to our Discord and our YouTube channel and everything of the like, which you can also find links to in the description of this podcast. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Lord Nbz. Bally, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. I'd also like to give a huge shout out to long-term listener and friend of the show, Kevin Sharma, who he gifted us $20 each, Nbz, to pick up Okami HD on the Switch.
He did, yeah.
Thank you so much to you, Kevin. I've dove into it. I'm a few hours into that game, and I'll be playing more for next time. But yeah, thank you so much for that. That's hugely appreciated.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I will get to it as soon as I have gone through Guacamelee 2, which I'm hotly anticipating. But yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. That is incredibly nice of you, and we will probably talk about it at some point on the show. So yeah, before we go, we should also probably talk about our email address. We didn't do emails this week. We did have one that related to Smash Brothers, but we always need more, and we'll be back to doing emails hopefully next time. So Bally, where can people send those emails to?
Please send your emails to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We will dive into some more emails next time.
Absolutely. And with that pretty much closes things out. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with some more video games and Nintendo to talk about, and some fun stuff. So thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you very, very soon, and goodbye. The musical interludes used on today's show were Ravenous Rapids from Overcooked 2, copyright Ghost Town Games 2018, and Dr. Cossack Stage 2 from Megaman 4, copyright Capcom 1991.